The first scream echoed through the stars. Not across the vacuum of space, sound could not survive there, but through every quantum relay, every military command lattice, every encrypted emergency network woven across the Galactic Conservatory. It arrived as a distortion that every sentient species instantly recognized. An impossible priority signal. The kind that had not been transmitted in over 3 million cycles. Within seconds, countless observation stations turned toward a single location drifting in the darkness between dying suns. A structure so vast that entire moons could disappear within its artificial atmosphere. A place every civilization knew by reputation but rarely questioned. The Conservatory. The greatest collection of living species ever assembled. The safest prison ever built. Then the alarms began. Crimson warning lights flooded endless corridors of polished alloy, painting sterile white walls in the color of fresh blood. Automated security drones detached from their charging stations with mechanical precision, their optical sensors flashing awake as containment protocols escalated one level after another. Heavy blast doors thundered shut across thousands of sectors. Defense satellites rotated into firing positions. Energy barriers ignited with blinding blue light, forming glowing cages inside even larger cages. Every system responded exactly as it had been designed to. Yet something was already wrong. The central intelligence overseeing the facility hesitated. For the first time since its creation, the machine encountered data it could not reconcile. Motion sensors detected movement. Thermal scanners detected nothing. Biometric readers reported no authorized life forms. Pressure plates activated, then instantly reset, as though whatever crossed them had never possessed measurable weight at all. One surveillance feed flickered to life. A long, empty corridor stretched into darkness, perfectly silent except for the distant pulse of warning sirens. Nothing moved. Then, for less than half a second, a shadow crossed the frame. Not walking. Not running. Almost, appearing. The image froze automatically for analysis, but enhancement software revealed only distortion, as if reality itself refused to focus on whatever had passed before the camera. Security teams rushed toward the disturbance. Elite guardians from worlds where warfare had become an art form advanced in flawless formation, their adaptive armor shifting colors with every step. Plasma rifles hummed softly in their hands, calibrated to eliminate creatures capable of tearing armored vehicles apart. They had hunted leviathans beneath methane oceans. They had survived wars against hive minds that consumed entire planets. None of that prepared them for what they found. The corridor was empty. Their commander ordered a sector sweep. No response came from the rear squad. He turned. 4 soldiers had vanished. Not fallen. Not retreated. Vanished. Their weapons lay scattered across the gleaming floor, still warm. Their armor displayed no damage. There were no scorch marks. No blood. No signs of struggle. Only silence. Then another scream. Closer. This one ended abruptly. Across the conservatory, observation chambers began locking down one after another as terrified administrators searched desperately for the source of the breach. Millions of exhibits remained safely contained. Except one. A modest habitat orbiting near the forgotten edge of the station. Its identification plaque still displayed the same dismissive classification it had carried for centuries. Exhibit 731. Species, human. Threat assessment, primitive. Containment level, minimal. A single line of text suddenly erased itself from the system. Then new words appeared without authorization. Containment status. Failed ****. Somewhere inside that artificial wilderness, something had escaped. And for the first time in millions of years, the galaxy was no longer watching humanity. It was running from it. Centuries before the alarms shattered the silence of the Galactic Conservatory, humanity's final chapter had seemed inevitable. Earth did not fall in a blaze of glorious resistance or apocalyptic fire. It faded beneath the overwhelming weight of civilizations that had already mastered the stars while humans were still arguing over borders. Fleets the size of continents descended through Earth's atmosphere without hatred or rage. They did not come to conquer for resources. They came to collect. To the alien coalition, humanity represented something too unpredictable to ignore and too dangerous to allow into the wider galaxy. Extinction, they concluded, would erase a fascinating evolutionary anomaly. Freedom, however, carried risks no responsible civilization was willing to accept. So they chose a third option. Preservation. The entire human race became the galaxy's most controversial exhibit. The habitat they built was breathtaking in its deception. From the sky, it looked like a living planet wrapped beneath an artificial horizon. Vast mountain ranges pierced clouds generated by climate engines. Endless forests swayed beneath carefully calibrated winds. Rivers carved through valleys exactly as they had on ancient Earth, while oceans stretched to the horizon, hiding colossal filtration systems beneath their waves. Crumbling cities were reconstructed from archived satellite scans, frozen forever in the image of a civilization that no longer existed. Above it all, hidden behind an invisible atmospheric shell, millions of alien visitors observed from panoramic galleries suspended in orbit. To the spectators, it was a masterpiece of biological preservation. To the humans below, it was simply the world. Generations passed without anyone remembering the real Earth. Children grew up believing the dome overhead was the natural sky, never realizing faint stars occasionally blinked out as observation platforms drifted across the artificial heavens. The seasons arrived precisely on schedule because orbital mirrors dictated them. Storms rolled in only after atmospheric computers approved their intensity. Even the migration of animals followed algorithms written by minds that viewed nature as a carefully maintained exhibit. Every part of life was controlled so perfectly that the prison became invisible. The cage did not need bars when its inhabitants had forgotten freedom. But memory is difficult to erase completely. Among the descendants of Earth's lost defenders lived a young woman named Mara. Her grandmother had whispered forbidden stories beside campfires, stories dismissed by most as comforting myths. Tales of oceans untouched by invisible ceilings. Of stars that belonged to no keeper. Of cities built by human hands rather than reconstructed by alien historians. Mara listened to every word, not because she fully believed them, but because something deep inside her refused to accept that the world ended at the horizon. Every morning before sunrise, while others hunted or gathered food, she climbed the tallest cliffs overlooking the endless forest. She studied birds, tracked shifting winds, and watched strange lights drifting silently across the night sky. Curiosity became her greatest act of rebellion. She trained in secret using forgotten techniques preserved through generations of oral tradition. Spears carved from hardened wood. Knives forged from salvaged metal hidden within ancient ruins. Every movement carried echoes of soldiers she had never met but somehow remembered through stories passed from parent to child. Others laughed at her obsession with preparing for enemies that never came. The alien caretakers had never openly attacked. Their drones floated silently overhead, observing, recording, always watching but rarely interfering. Life was difficult, but predictable. Safe, in its own unnatural way. Yet every time Mara looked toward the shimmering edge of the distant mountains, where the air sometimes flickered with impossible blue light, she felt something watching back. Not with cruelty. Not with curiosity. With expectation. As though the prison itself had been waiting centuries for someone willing to ask the one question every other human had forgotten. What lies beyond the sky? The change began with something so small that anyone else would have walked past it without a second glance. Just before dawn, while the forest still clung to the cold breath of night, Mara followed a trail of scorched earth winding through the trees. Birds had abandoned the area. Even the insects were silent, leaving only the soft crackle of dying branches beneath her boots. A strange metallic scent hung in the air, sharp, electric, completely foreign to a world built from forests and rivers. Ahead, an unnatural glow pulsed faintly beneath a collapsed hillside, as though a fragment of the sky itself had fallen into the earth. She approached cautiously. Half buried beneath shattered stone lay a machine unlike anything she had ever imagined. Its surface shimmered between silver and black, changing texture every time light touched it. Blue sparks danced across fractured panels, while strange symbols rippled over its hull like liquid fire. One wing had been torn away, carving a deep scar through the forest before finally crashing among ancient roots. An alien maintenance drone. Not one of the silent observers that occasionally drifted overhead. Something far more advanced. Its smooth outer shell had been ripped open, exposing layers of crystalline circuitry that pulsed like a living heartbeat. Strange fluids leaked into the soil, causing nearby plants to grow and wither within seconds. Mara stared in silence, every instinct warning her to run. Instead, she stepped closer. The machine was still alive. A damaged mechanical arm twitched weakly, reaching toward a glowing sphere trapped beneath twisted metal. It wasn't attacking. It was trying to protect something. The sphere fit perfectly into the palm of her hand. The instant her fingers touched its surface, the forest disappeared. Streams of light exploded around her. Stars stretched into endless rivers. Entire galaxies rotated before her eyes in breathtaking silence as countless voices whispered in languages no human had spoken. Data flooded her mind faster than thought itself. Maps. Histories. War records. Genetic archives. Classified transmissions marked with symbols she somehow understood despite never seeing them before. Then one message forced everything else aside. Species designation, humanity. Status, contained. She froze. New files opened automatically. Images flashed before her, human colonies burning beneath orbital bombardments, alien fleets retreating from desperate human counterattacks, entire civilizations collapsing decades after first contact with mankind. The record stretched back thousands of years, documenting conflict after conflict across the galaxy. None of them ended the same way. Whenever humans survived, they adapted. Whenever they adapted, empires fell. A final classified report appeared. Its title sent a chill through her entire body. Reason for permanent containment. Her breathing stopped. The report did not describe humans as primitive. It described them as evolutionary anomalies. Impossible to predict. Impossible to permanently defeat. Every attempt at peaceful integration had ended with humanity surpassing its hosts technologically, militarily, or culturally within a handful of generations. Every civilization that underestimated human resilience eventually found itself transformed, or destroyed, by it. The zoo had never been created to study humanity. It had been created to isolate it. To keep the rest of the galaxy safe. The vision shattered. Mara stumbled backward, gasping for air as the glowing sphere dimmed in her trembling hands. The forest returned with startling clarity. Then the ground shook. A deep mechanical roar rolled across the valley. She looked toward the sky. High above the artificial clouds, invisible seams of blue light spread across the heavens like cracks in glass. Massive sections of the dome flickered violently. Energy barriers that had stood for centuries collapsed one after another in blinding flashes. The prison was breaking. Without warning, every tree around her was bathed in crimson light. From the clouds descended towering hunter drones, their armored frames unfolding with terrifying precision. Razor-like limbs extended. Targeting sensors ignited. One after another, they locked onto a single biological signature. Human. Mara tightened her grip around the alien core. The truth had found her. Now the galaxy intended to bury it forever. The hunter drones never fired. They hung motionless above the forest, their weapons fully charged, their targeting beams fixed on Mara's chest. The air vibrated with restrained power, turning every breath into a struggle. Leaves trembled without wind. Birds erupted from the treetops in desperate flocks, only to vanish into the artificial clouds overhead. Time itself seemed suspended between one heartbeat and the next. Mara tightened her grip around the glowing navigation core, waiting for the blast that would erase her existence. It never came. Instead, every drone froze. Their crimson targeting lights blinked once, twice, then shifted to a calm, brilliant white. Across the entire habitat, a voice emerged from nowhere and everywhere at once. It wasn't loud, yet it filled the mountains, echoed through rivers, and rolled beneath the earth itself. It carried no anger, no warmth, no emotion, only the quiet certainty of something unimaginably ancient. Evaluation complete. The words were spoken in no language Mara had ever learned, yet she understood every syllable as if they had always belonged in her mind. Far beneath the forest floor, deeper than any human had ever dug, colossal mechanisms began to awaken. Ancient gears, sealed for ages beyond memory, grown to life. Entire mountain ranges trembled as hidden structures shifted beneath them. The sky itself rippled with concentric waves of blue light, revealing for the first time that the heavens above were not endless at all, but the inside surface of a colossal engineered sphere. Then came the truth. The navigation core projected a three-dimensional archive into the air. Countless stars shimmered around Mara, accompanied by images of civilizations rising and falling across millions of years. At the center of every timeline stood the same silent observer, an intelligence older than the Galactic Conservatory, older than the coalition that ruled the stars, perhaps older than civilization itself. It had watched everything. It had watched species discover fire. It had watched empires consume galaxies. It had watched entire races erase themselves through pride and fear. And centuries ago, it had watched humanity. When the coalition debated whether humans should be exterminated or imprisoned, this intelligence had intervened. Not out of mercy, but curiosity. It saw something the galaxy could not. A species defined not by strength or technology, but by relentless adaptation. A civilization that grew stronger under pressure, wiser through failure, and more dangerous every time it survived. The conservatory had never been intended as a prison. It had been a trial. A crucible. Every hardship, every controlled famine, every predator released into the forests, every generation forced to rebuild from ruin, none of it had been random. Every challenge measured a single question. Could humanity still become itself after everything had been taken away? The answer stood breathing beneath the trees. Mara. The intelligence spoke her name. You remember what your ancestors forgot. Around the world, impossible things began happening. Massive steel walls hidden beneath mountains split apart with deafening echoes. Invisible barriers dissolved into shimmering particles. Observation domes cracked like thin ice before exploding outward into the darkness of space. Alien visitors who had spent centuries watching humanity through reinforced glass stumbled backward in terror as the barriers between observer and exhibit disappeared forever. Emergency broadcasts erupted across every channel in the Galactic Conservatory. Containment failure. Security override denied. Central authority revoked. Then every screen, every holographic display, every military command center across the galaxy displayed a single message written in thousands of languages simultaneously. Predator classification updated. Humanity no longer requires containment. Panic spread faster than light. Admirals demanded explanations. Scientists insisted it was impossible. Politicians called for immediate planetary quarantines. Only the oldest historians understood what those words truly meant. They remembered forgotten legends buried beneath censored archives, stories of civilizations that vanished after dismissing humans as primitive. Inside the shattered habitat, Mara looked upward as the artificial sky peeled away for the first time in human history. Beyond it stretched the real universe. Infinite. Untamed. Waiting. And somewhere among those countless stars, an entire galaxy had just realized it had never been guarding a zoo. It had been guarding the door. The galaxy expected vengeance. It prepared for extermination. Every military command from the core worlds to the distant frontier colonies activated emergency war protocols within hours of humanity's release. Planetary shields flared to life around glittering megacities. Defense fleets gathered in impossible numbers, stretching across orbital horizons like walls of steel and fire. Ancient superweapons, sealed since forgotten wars, were awakened beneath frozen moons. The coalition believed it understood humanity's next move. It was wrong. Mara stood beneath the broken dome as thousands of humans gathered around her, staring at a sky that was no longer artificial. For the first time in countless generations, they could see stars that had never been painted onto a ceiling. Some wept openly. Others simply fell to their knees in stunned silence. Children reached upward with trembling hands, unable to understand why the heavens suddenly felt endless. "We are free," Mara whispered. Then she looked toward the alien warships descending through the clouds. But freedom must survive. The first battle began before sunrise. Dropships pierced the atmosphere like burning meteors, carrying elite containment forces determined to restore the prison before humanity could spread beyond it. Their armor shimmered with adaptive energy fields. Their weapons could reduce mountains to molten glass. Their commanders had studied every known form of galactic warfare. None of them had studied humans. Mara refused to meet overwhelming force with overwhelming force. Instead, she turned the world itself into a weapon. The forests that had sheltered generations became living ambushes. Ancient tunnels beneath ruined cities transformed into invisible highways for guerrilla fighters. Hunters who had spent lifetimes tracking dangerous beasts now stalked heavily armed invaders through fog-covered valleys with silent precision. Engineers dismantled crashed alien drones, learning their technology overnight through relentless experimentation. Farmers mixed unfamiliar chemicals into improvised explosives. Blacksmiths fused salvaged alien alloys with handmade blades that could pierce advanced armor. Every defeat became a lesson. Every lesson became an advantage. The coalition won the first battle. They barely survived the second. By the third, they were retreating. Military analysts across the galaxy watched in disbelief as humanity evolved faster than any predictive model could calculate. Strategies that worked in the morning failed by nightfall. Security codes remained effective for only hours before humans found ways around them. Captured weapons returned to the battlefield pointed in the opposite direction. Communication networks became traps. Supply lines vanished. Even the coalition's artificial intelligences began issuing impossible reports. Enemy behavior cannot be predicted. Adaptation rate exceeds acceptable parameters. Probability of long-term containment, 0. Weeks turned into months. The prison became a fortress. The fortress became a launch point. Then came the battle that ended the war. Above the shattered conservatory, the coalition assembled its greatest fleet, thousands of warships forming a wall that eclipsed the stars. Against them rose a collection of patched-together human vessels built from salvaged wreckage, repaired cargo ships, captured cruisers, and machines no engineer had ever intended to fly together. By every calculation, humanity should have been destroyed within minutes. Instead, every captain fought as though every other ship were an extension of their own. Pilots sacrificed themselves to open escape corridors for strangers they had met only hours before. Engineers rerouted failing reactors into enemy formations, buying precious seconds for civilians to flee. Medics carried wounded soldiers while firing captured weapons with their free hands. Scientists rewrote alien navigation systems in the middle of combat. No one waited for orders. They simply solved the next impossible problem. one impossible problem at a time. As the Coalition's flagship finally powered down its weapons and transmitted unconditional surrender, silence spread across the battlefield. Not because humanity had become the strongest species, but because it had proven something far more terrifying. Strength could be matched. Technology could be copied. Numbers could be overcome. But a civilization that refused to stop learning, refused to stop adapting, refused to abandon one another, could never truly be defeated. Years after the last Coalition warship lowered its weapons, the Galactic Conservatory still drifted through the silent darkness between the stars. But it no longer resembled the flawless monument that had once embodied absolute control. Its enormous observation domes lay shattered, their crystal fragments orbiting the ancient structure like frozen tears. Endless corridors that had echoed with the footsteps of alien caretakers were now empty, reclaimed by vines creeping through fractured walls and roots breaking apart polished alloy floors. Artificial rivers overflowed their carefully engineered banks, washing away pathways that had once guided millions of curious visitors. Nature, once meticulously controlled, had chosen freedom over perfection. The greatest zoo ever built had become a monument to a mistake the galaxy would never repeat. Humanity did not return to rebuild its prison. Instead, it crossed the stars. The descendants of those who had lived beneath a false sky spread across countless worlds, not as conquerors, but as explorers carrying with them the hard lessons carved into generations of captivity. They terraformed barren planets into thriving homes. They restored ecosystems ruined by ancient wars. They forged alliances with civilizations that had once feared even speaking the word human. Their ships became symbols of hope in sectors abandoned by the old Coalition, arriving not with demands but with engineers, doctors, scientists, and teachers. The galaxy had expected monsters born from centuries of imprisonment. Instead, it encountered survivors who understood the value of freedom because they had lived without it. Mara grew old beneath real stars. She often returned to the abandoned conservatory, walking the same forest trails where she had once discovered the broken maintenance drone that changed everything. The trees had grown taller now, their branches stretching through gaps in the ruined dome toward the open cosmos. Children laughed where hunter drones had once descended from crimson skies. Wildlife roamed beyond invisible barriers that no longer existed. Sometimes visitors asked Mara whether she hated the civilizations that had imprisoned humanity for so long. She would look upward before answering. "I hate the fear that built the cage," she would say quietly. But not those who were trapped inside it. Because she understood something history often forgot. The aliens had not been prisoners of walls. They had been prisoners of fear. Fear of change. Fear of uncertainty. Fear of a species they could never fully predict. That fear had blinded an entire galaxy to the possibility that humanity's greatest strength was never its capacity for war, it was its ability to endure, to rebuild, and to choose compassion even after unimaginable suffering. Long after Mara's lifetime, schools across thousands of worlds made pilgrimages to the ruins of the conservatory. Young students from species that had once considered humans terrifying stood together beneath the broken entrance, listening as their teachers described the place where history had turned. The old exhibit signs had long since rusted away. The containment fields had vanished. Only one polished slab of black stone remained standing where the main gate had once sealed shut. Its inscription was simple. Never imprison a species that learns faster than fear. No one claimed to know who carved those words. Some believed it was Mara. Others believed it had appeared on its own after the war. In time, the mystery no longer mattered. Because every child who stood before that monument understood its meaning. The strength of a civilization is not measured by the size of its fleets, or the power of its weapons, or the height of its walls. It is measured by what it becomes after everything has been taken away. And somewhere beyond the endless horizon of known space, new stars continued to ignite, waiting for those bold enough to seek them. Whenever a human ship disappeared into the unknown, its engines fading into the darkness beyond the galaxy's edge, people would watch in silence, not with fear, but with hope. For the universe had finally learned the truth. Humanity was never the galaxy's greatest prisoner. It was always destined to become its greatest frontier.